Hello and welcome to our first video of the year. I'm pretty excited about this and you'll have to let me know how this went for you tomorrow in class. So to start, what I'd like you to do is, the first thing I want to make sure you have out is your binder, and then in your binder you should have the table of contents. And in your table of contents, you can write down today's date and you can write down 1-2 order of operations. The second thing I want you to do is get out your note sheet for lesson 1-2 order of operations day 1. Get that note sheet out, and if you ever forget your note sheet at school or lose it, you can go to my website or to our site and get a new one, print a new one. So get your note sheet out. Okay, and then the last two things are have a pencil out. I would like you to do your math in pencil. It's the best way to do it, so if you have mistakes you can go back and erase. And for today, we're no calculator, and a lot of our problems and assignments this year will be no calculator. There will be sometimes with calculator, but no calculator for today. Note sheet. On your note sheet, you'll find that there is a spot that says YWBAT. That stands for you will be able to. And what I'd like you to do now is pause the tape and write in what you'll be able to do. So you're going to write this in right here. You will be able to apply the order of operations and grouping symbols to simplify expressions. So hit the pause button now and fill in your note sheet. Okay, next we're going to go to this slide. We have a problem here. Sally and Susie simplified the following problem and each got a different answer. Who is correct? What I'd like you to do right now is to work this problem out yourself and see what answer you get and see if you feel that Sally's correct or Susie's correct, or if you got a different answer altogether. So hit the pause button and do that right now. Okay, so hopefully you got your answer, and let's see what the correct answer is. So if we look here, what we see is the first thing that they did was they did 3 times 2 and they got 6. Then they did 4 times 3 and they got 12. And then what they did, they went back and they did 15 plus 6, they got 21, and then 21 minus the 12 got 9. Now, what shape does this work make? If you look at this, it makes a shape that we call the funnel, or a funnel, and you'll hear me refer to that. We call this the funnel method, because what I want you to do when you solve these problems is to show each step of your work, but make sure that you're bringing down the numbers that are still in the problem. Okay? And if you do that, eventually your problem will get smaller and smaller and come down to just one number, and that will be your answer. So I would like you to write and fill in your worksheet right now and fill in the funnel method. It makes the shape of a funnel. All right, now we're going to do some practice problems. So in math, we have rules to make sure that each problem is solved the correct way. And you might have heard this at Oak Point, or that one acronym we use is GEMDAS. And what GEMDAS stands for is the G stands for grouping symbols. And there are different kinds of grouping symbols. And what I want you to do is fill in your sheet and write grouping symbols, but then let's give some examples. So one example is a parentheses. Another example is a bracket. Another example is something that's called a brace. It looks like this, and I'm not doing the best job of it. And then the last example is a line, a straight line like that, a horizontal line called a vinculum. So after you fill in the 4 different kinds of grouping symbols, let's move to our next step. Our next step is we would look at the problem and see if there are any exponents. So the E stands for exponents. And it also stands for roots. We're not going to get into roots till later this year, but it does, exponents and roots are in the same family. But exponents would be 2 to the 3rd power. And we'll get into what that equals later, but that's an example. Then we move on to M and D. M stands for multiply, and the D stands for divide. Now it's important to note that when you do multiply and divide, it's like when you read a book. You want to do whatever happens on the left first and then the right. So we look at the problem left to right, and you'll hear me talk about this when I solve some problems, that we're going to do the problem left to right when we're at this stage, the multiply divide stage. I also want to remind you, pause this at any time if I'm going too fast or if you want to go back and review something. The last step in the order of operations, and you've probably guessed it already, is A and then S. So the A stands for add and the S stands for subtract. And that follows the same rule as multiply and divide. We're going to do that left to right. So what I want you to do is make sure that your notes are all filled up to this point, and we're going to do some practice problems together. When we do the practice problems, I want to make sure that you write down the work exactly the way I have it, and that way when we get to class, you know what I expect. And also when you do your homework the next day, you'll know what I expect for showing work. It is important to show work. It's a good way to see what you've done, and also it's a good way to ask me questions. If you happen to get the wrong answer, you can go back and look at where a mistake occurred. So let's start with our first problem. 12 divided by 3 times 5 minus 7. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write on the left, I'd like you to do this too, GEMDAS. GEMDAS, to remind myself what order I'm going to solve this problem in. So I'm going to, when I simplify the problem, the first thing I'm going to look for are grouping symbols. So I do not see a parentheses or brackets or a vinculum. I don't see any grouping symbols. So what I'm going to do is finish that, step's done, and now I'm going to go to the next step. And that's E for exponent. I do not see any exponents here, so I'm going to go to the next step. That step is multiply or divide. And remember what I said is you do those left to right. Multiply doesn't always come first. So let's look at our problem. We have 12 divided by 3. 12 divided by 3 is multiply or divide, so I'm going to do that first. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. And then what I'm going to do is bring down the rest of the problem. Okay? Now I'm going to look. Do I have any more multiplying or dividing? And if I look, yes I do. 4 times 5 is 20, so I'm going to go 20, and then I'll bring down the minus 7. Now I look at the problem. I do not see any more multiplying or dividing, so I'm going to cross that step off, and now I'm going to go to the last step. And the last step is add or subtract. So I look. 20 minus 7 is 13. And then what I'm going to do is circle that. That's my final answer. And again, it made a nice funnel shape. So you'll hear me talk about that, and I would like your work to appear this way. Okay, hopefully you got the last problem filled in your notes, and now we're going to move on to the next example problem. So again, we're going to write the GEMDAS on the side to make sure that we're following the right order. And I'm going to start with the G for grouping symbols. So I look at this problem and I see a parentheses right here. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to copy everything else down, 17 minus 3 times 5 plus, now I have 3 plus 9. That equals 12, so I'm going to write the 12, and I do not need to write the parentheses anymore. Once you simplify a parentheses, you don't need to write it anymore. And then I'll bring down the divide by 4. Next, I'm going to look through the problem, and I don't see any more parentheses or grouping symbols, so I'm going to cross off the G. My next letter is the E, and on the E, that would be exponents, and I do not see any exponents. So now I'm going to go to multiply, divide. Again, when I get to multiply, divide, I'm going to go left to right, and what I'm going to do is look at the 17 minus 3, so that's a minus, so I'm going to skip that. But I am going to look at the 3 times 5, and my 3 is kind of sloppy, sorry about that. 3 times 5 is 15, so I'm going to bring the 17 down and write 17 minus, and I'm going to write 3 times 5 is 15. And then I'll bring down the plus sign, and I'll bring down the 12, and I'll bring down the divide by 4. Then I'll look at my problem again. Do I have any multiplying or dividing? And I look and I see that 12 divided by 4 is division, so I'll bring everything down. 17 minus 15 plus, now I'm going to do 12 divided by 4, and that's 3. Then I look at my problem, and I don't see any more multiplying and dividing, so I'll cross it off. Lastly, I'm on add, subtract, so I'm on the add, subtract right now. Again, left to right, so I'm going to look at the 17 minus 15, and I'll do that, and I'll get 2. And then I bring down the plus 3. So 2 plus 3 is 5. And now I'm going to circle that. All right? Then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, we're on our third example problem, and by this time you're probably starting to get the hang of it. We're going to look for our grouping symbols first, and I look and I see 2 plus 4 in a parentheses. So what I'm going to do is copy everything down. 2 times 8 minus 4 divided by 2 times, and then 2 plus 4 is 6, and again I don't have to write the parentheses anymore now after I simplified it, and I'll bring down the minus 4. Then I look and I see the parentheses and grouping symbols are gone, so I'm going to cross that off, and then I look for exponents next. There are no exponents, and we're not going to do exponents until tomorrow, so we can cross that off. Now we have multiply or divide, and remember we look left to right, so I see 2 times 8. 2 times 8 is 16. And then what I can do is I bring down the minus, and then I have 4 divided by 2. Now, it is okay to do 4 divided by 2 even on the same line, and we'll do 4 divided by 2 is 2. Then I'm going to bring down the times 6 minus 4. Just to make sure I don't miss any steps. So I look at my problem and I see that I still have a multiplication sign there. So I'll go 16 minus 2 times 6 is 12, and then I bring down the minus 4. Now I look, all my multiplying and dividing is done, so I cross that off. My last step is adding and subtracting left to right. And I look and I see, starting on the left, I see 16 minus 12, and that's 4. And then I bring down my minus 4. So 4 minus 4 is 0. So my answer for this is 0. Please make sure that you always circle your answer when you're done with the problem. Okay, now we're on our fourth example problem. So what I'm going to do again is look for my grouping symbols. I go right to that parentheses. Now in this parentheses we have two different operations going on, and when that happens, you follow the order of operations. So I am going to do the 4 times 2. I'm going to do that first because multiplying and dividing comes before subtracting and adding. So again, I'll copy down the problem. 24 minus 6 divided by 3 plus, now in this parentheses, I'm going to do 4 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Then I'll bring down the minus 3. All right, I still have parentheses, so I'm going to bring stuff down again. 24 minus 6 divided by 3 plus, now 8 minus 3 is my parentheses, and that equals 5. My parentheses are gone, so cross that grouping symbol off. And let's do exponents. And there are no exponents, so let's do multiply or divide. So 24 minus 6 divided by 3. So I'm going to do the 6 divided by 3. So I get 24 minus 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then I bring down my plus 5. Now, all the multiplying and dividing is gone. Cross that off. Add or subtract. That's left to right. So here I'm going to subtract before I add. That can happen if it's written on the left. So 24 minus 2 is 22. And then I bring down the plus 5. And I get 22 plus 5 is 27. And that is my answer. Okay, this is our last example problem. And this is a more complex one, but really easy to do still. We're going to do our grouping symbols first, and if you look, we have two kinds of grouping symbols. We have a parentheses and we have brackets. When that happens, when you have grouping symbols inside grouping symbols, you always want to do the one most in the middle, the inside one first. So what we're going to do is bring down the 2, and then bring down the bracket, and we'll do 15 divided by, now instead of doing, and then we'll say 2 plus 1, so we'll say 15 divided by 2 plus 1 is 3 plus 6 minus 7, so bring that down. Now I still have grouping symbols, I still have a bracket, so just like I said before, inside of grouping symbols, follow the order of operations. So I'm going to bring my 2 down, and I'm going to do 15 divided by 3 because division happens before adding or subtracting. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. And then I'll have my plus 6 and bring my bracket down, and then my minus 7. So 5, I still have my grouping symbols. So 5 plus 6 is 11. I'll do 2 bracket 11 minus 7. So my grouping symbols are done. There are no exponents. Now I'm on multiply or divide. Now, if we look, you don't see any multiplication or division symbols, but there's a little rule in math that if you have a number next to a bracket or next to a parentheses, that means that there's an invisible times sign there. There's a tiny times sign, multiplication sign. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 times 11. 2 times 11 is 22. And then we're going to do the minus 7 last. Okay, our multiplying and dividing is done, and now we have minus 7 last. So 22 minus 7 is 15, and we'll circle that. All right, so now what I'd like you to do is to complete your 5 practice problems, and please make sure you show all work and do not use a calculator, and show work using the funnel method. And then bring that to class tomorrow, and we'll go over any questions you had, or we'll see what ways I can help you. So you just finished your first flip video, and so did I, so it's a good feeling. See you tomorrow.